What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to be ranking all 5 Hunger Games films from the worst to the best. Of course, with the release of the brand new Hunger Games movie, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, thought this would be a great time to do it because I don't think they're going to release a new movie in probably a while. I don't believe there's any more books that they can do movies off of, but if they do in the future, maybe we'll do a ranking again. But this will be fun because I've loved pretty much all these movies. There's really not any of them that I think are terrible, but it is still interesting talking about which one is the best and the least best out of all of them. Starting off with the number 5 spot, I'm going to go with Mockingjay Part 1. And I think this is probably where most people would put this movie. I think most people would say it's the worst. I don't think it's bad. Obviously, like I just said, all these movies are solid. But I just feel like this one has the burden of being the first part of a two-parter. Obviously, it's a lot more setup, not as much payoff. But that doesn't mean it's not good. There's so many great moments in this film. I think it has some of the best just character moments in the whole franchise, especially between Katniss and Gale. I think those two characters are probably the standout of this movie. I think Peeta gets a lot more to do later on and also in the prior films, but in this one, he's mainly, of course, being used by the Capitol to kind of discourage the rebellion, essentially, but he was being brainwashed, as we learn later on. And I absolutely love that storyline, and I think the whole love triangle thing is probably the most centric part of this because there's back and forth between Katniss and Gale for a lot of it, and obviously it doesn't come to full fruition later on. But in this one, I liked a lot of that story there, and just a lot of the characters kind of planning for this rebellion, what they should do, what they think they should do. And I think it works just fine as a first parter. Of course, like I said, it's just the weakest. Because of that, I don't really have anything negative to say about it because it's really not a bad movie. None of these are bad movies. It's also the only one without a game, which is not a problem, but of course, it has less of that appeal of the whole Hunger Games aspect, as the other movies all have that in some way, shape, or form. This one doesn't actually have that, but there's still a lot of great scenes. Like I said, I think it's jam-packed with amazing moments, so it just has to be in the last place because one of the movies has to be. In number 4 spot, I'm actually going to go with the first Hunger Games movie, which might be a shock to some people because I know this is a lot of people's favorite, or at least it's their second favorite. But like I said, there's nothing really wrong with this movie necessarily. It's just not one of my favorites. I think it does a lot of great world building for this universe itself. It has some fantastic introductions to these characters with Katniss, Peeta, and Gale mostly. Obviously, you have a lot of other characters. There are a lot of great side characters in this universe. But the way it introduces you to the games and the districts and the Capitol and kind of explaining why these things exist in this world, what happened, what led up to it, it does such a fantastic job at it. Like I rarely see movies do such a great job of introducing an entire universe in one movie and you understanding exactly what everything is, why everything is the way it is. And you don't even really need the other movies to explain more, but this one in and itself could still explain the universe pretty damn well to you. Of course, when you get to the game itself, it's very great. I think my only issue maybe is the shaky cam that they use. I know a lot of people critique the movie for that. A lot of the action scenes are very shaky with the camera. Of course, this is the only Hunger Games movie with a different director than the rest of them. The rest of them go with, of course, Francis Lawrence. This film, I believe, was Gary Ross. So definitely feels a bit different than the other ones because of that, but it still keeps the same sort of feel and tone that the rest of the movies do keep up with. And I do really like the tributes here. Obviously, a big character that a lot of people always talk about is Rue, of course, being one of the tributes. But obviously, I think the connection between Katniss and Peeta here in the game itself was definitely the standout part of this movie. In number 3 spot, I've got Mockingjay Part 2. So Mockingjay Part 2 has some incredible conclusions for this universe. The payoff is there, which is interesting because it's not even necessarily a happy ending. Of course, they do get a somewhat happy ending where they're just done with all this shit. They just kind of leave the rebellion, they leave the Capitol. They're just out on their own, of course, Katniss and Peeta. That is a happy ending in a sense. But in terms of the world, they didn't fix the world. They didn't fix everything, which I feel like was a more realistic thing. Like if they just had this, oh, she, kills the person, the evil person, she wins and everyone's safe and everyone's happy, that would be unrealistic. And honestly, it wouldn't have kept the same tone of what that universe has. But I really do love how the whole series ends with, of course, she has the option to kill Snow, but instead she kills the person going against Snow because she ended up being, I don't want to say just as evil, but in a sense, probably just as evil as Snow was. She still had very evil plans. She was doing all sorts of terrible things even before that. And I mean, Katniss was just fed up with it. And so she killed her. And then, of course, Snow got killed anyways by all the angry mobs people. it's one of those things where they couldn't have fixed everything. They just couldn't have on their own. And I think that felt like a better ending just because of that. Even the movie itself, though, before that, I love how they turned the Capitol into an actual Hunger Games itself with all the characters that were there. And this one honestly has some of the best characters in the franchise. I love everyone who's there. And then they get, thrown into this game in the Capitol, like I said, and it's really crazy. The scale and scope of it is amongst some of the greatest stuff in this franchise. Like that whole tsunami sequence, well, not really tsunami, but you know what I mean, the whole, water flooding sequence. Stuff like that is just so awesome. And the scene where Fennec dies as well. In number 2 spot, I've got The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the brand new Hunger Games movie, which of course was a prequel primarily to show President Snow way back when he was like 18, 19 years old, a lot younger. Not sure exactly how old he was supposed to be in that, but he was rather young. And I absolutely loved this movie. I was not expecting it to be one of my favorites in this franchise. I was definitely expecting it to be probably on the lower end, but I was still expecting it to be good at the very least. And it was amazing. It straight up was. I thought it was some of the best writing that this entire franchise has had. So first of all, it does build upon all the other movies. Of course, it being a prequel, you have a lot of different characters here. The only character that is in this that's also in the other movies, of course, is Snow and his sister. I can't think of any other characters there that ends up going into the later films, but could be wrong. I just don't remember. Off the top of my head, I don't remember any of them. So I just think the way it was handled, the directing, the soundtrack, the characters, and the exploration of the games at the early times, it was only the 10th game here, and a lot of characters were against it, even within the Capitol itself. And I liked how this movie focused so much more on the mentors. Of course, the other movies mainly focused on the tributes. This one had such a heavy focus on the mentors. That was such a big part of it. And you even get to see what they do as the games go along. And there's different elements, different features that were being introduced to the games for the first time here, or at least some early editions of it. And the idea of the people of the Capitol being closer to the tributes and kind of understanding them more, learning more about them, which we end up seeing very much so in the later movies with all like the marketing and everything like that of the actual tributes themselves. You start to see an introduction of that here, and a big part of that has to do with Snow's propositions, and he gives those off, and a lot of characters, are kind of confused by it, but you kind of see what he means, and it actually does end up helping the games in the end, of course. Some of the characters there, of course, like Dr. Gall, Peter Dinklage's character, I believe his name was Highbottom. Fantastic stuff. Like the performances there were all phenomenal. It's a pretty long movie, but every second of it counted and every second of it mattered to me. And I honestly think it's just one of the best ones. It has probably the weakest game in the franchise, but honestly, that's not really the point of this movie, so didn't really care. I think it had some of the best dialogue and writing in the series. It's got to be number 2. But in the number 1 spot has to be Catching Fire. Of course, this is not only the best Hunger Games movie, this is one of the best movies of all time. It's in my top 100, I think. It's up there somewhere. It's a phenomenal film. I think one of the best moments that I always go back to, because I think it's one of the best moments in film, is when Katniss is first getting lifted up to the actual arena itself. And I'm such a simple man, but aspect ratio changes are so amazing when they're done right. The whole movie's filmed in a certain way, and then that shit just widens out. It's like, oh man, it's so beautiful. This movie is amazing. I wish I could have seen it in IMAX back in theaters, but I hope they show it again someday, because I would definitely go to see it just for that one scene itself. I would go to watch it just for that. It definitely has the best game in the franchise. It's some of the most intense scenes in the game. The characters are some of the best. Of course, you have Finnick being introduced here, and he's a great character. The game itself is a really big twist, because you're not really sure what's going to happen in this movie, because you're like, okay, how can they top the prior film where we had this whole game that was just so great, and the tributes don't come back later on for the game, so you were confused, like, okay, well, how is Katniss going to get involved in here? And then Snow makes the decision right then and there to make it so all the past tributes, or at least some of the past tributes, get chosen to be in this Hunger Games again, and that was so huge. That was such a big moment, and it was like, what the fuck? And then she gets put back into it along with Peeta. And that moment was just huge. Like, that was such like, oh my God, she's got to go back into that. And then when she gets put into it, she's so terrified, because she beat death once. She beat it once, and she has to go do it again. And somehow she pulls it off. And she doesn't pull it off in the traditional sense. She actually just tries to destroy the roof of the thing. And then they end up rescuing her, the rebels. And that was the whole plan there. But it was so well executed. The entire last act of this movie is amazing, but even leading up to that, it is so good. Yeah, this is easily the best movie in the franchise. I don't think it's even a question. I think most people would probably agree with me, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, because I have no idea what a lot of you actually think are, the ranking for these movies. I just checked Letterboxd and IMDb and different sites to see what a lot of people tend to think, and I think my ranking's kind of close to what most people would say, except for I think most people would put The Hunger Games, the first one, a bit higher, but that's about it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you want to see my reactions to the prior Hunger Games movies, definitely go check that out. If you want to see my full review for the recent prequel that just came out, you can go check that out as well. That is on the channel. So I will see you guys on my next one. Peace out.